Well, hey everybody. Man, I am dealing with all kinds of technical issues today. Don't really know why because I'm old and I don't understand all the technology, but hey, it's Motivational Monday. I don't know about you, but I didn't want to wrap up the end of the day and say, wait, there was no Motivational Monday. I missed something. So I apologize for it being as late in the day as it is. But I could tell you I've got all these great excuses and reasons. The reality is, I've been kind of on the run this weekend, and I, quite honestly, I was out for a wedding of a child of a friend of ours. Happens to be one of my son's good friends, and so we went up to northern Indiana, up by Michigan, to be part of the wedding this weekend, and got to see some friends for a little bit, and it was a fantastic time. And that got me thinking about what I really wanted to kind of focus in and talk about on today's Motivational Monday. It got me thinking about the mile markers in our lives, the mile markers that we have in life's journey. That it's the types of things that tend to become anchors in our memory of things that were really important. And sometimes those mile markers are really positive things. For instance, this last weekend being part of our good friend's wedding, pretty positive mile marker. There are other mile markers that we talk about, particularly for those of us who have multiple sclerosis. We'll talk about the diagnosis date. And that's a mile marker that becomes an anchor point of when did we find out that we were part of this exclusive club known as the MS Warriors Club. I don't know if there's any of us that went signing up for it. We're like, I want to get into that club. Let me in. But the reality is, it was an anchor of a point that we look back at, and we have kind of a point where we see that, and that's part of our journey, and that's where the mile marker kind of gets set. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, what it is about things that we set as mile markers in our journey of life that we get to choose a lot of times how important something is, and whether we're going to allow it to become a mile marker in our memory, or if it's just something that happened and we go on. It's like mile markers. When you graduate from high school, man, that was a mile marker. And for so many of us, you go through all those early years and you're just focused on, I want to graduate. I can't wait to graduate. And we graduate, and you look back at it, and there's memories of great fondness of high school. There's memories of, man, I'm glad I graduated because I wanted to get out of there before I killed somebody type thing. We got memories of teachers that we loved. We got memories of teachers that we hated. But graduation was one of those mile markers that it was a mixture of the good and the bad. But when you graduated, it was kind of that, hey, I completed something important, and I'm going to remember that. And it becomes a mile marker on our life's journey. Maybe it was your first job that was a really big mile marker that became something where you look back at it and you say, well, I learned so many great memories back then. I discovered new things in that journey of finding that job and going to work. And I remember my first job I worked at a steakhouse, and I discovered that I wasn't old enough to work there, but because my parents were on staff at a college and we lived at the college, when I applied for the job, I was 14 years old, and I applied for the job. And the guy saw that I had a college address, and so he was like, "Well, this college student looks pretty young, but I'm going to go ahead and hire him because I need help." And I worked there for quite a while before he ever found out that I wasn't even old enough to be working because I didn't have a work permit from the school. But it was one of those important things, you know. But then my second job, which I look back at kind of as my first real job, because uh, I really got that job out of merit, not because they thought I was a college student. Uh, and I remember Mr. Adamson was the manager, and he was just that type of guy that taught me some real important aspects of work ethic. And he taught my brother Rick and I both worked at the same place for a while, and he taught us both the importance of getting your work done and working really hard, but then having the fun and having that time to play a little bit as well. And he was just a great boss, you know. And I look back at that job as one of those mile markers. Um, we talked about the wedding that we were just at. You know, our wedding, when Mary and I got married, that's a mile marker of you know, when life changed and became better in a lot of ways, became so much better. Ironically, we were talking this weekend about with our friends whose son we went to be there for his wedding. We were actually in his parents' wedding, and his parents were in our wedding, and we've known them for a long time. We're really good friends, and we were talking about you know, it's 20 some years ago, and I don't want to get into the details exactly how long ago it was, but it was a little bit more than 20 years, and we both were talking and realizing that we couldn't quite remember who all was in our wedding party. We remembered some of the people, but not all of the people. And you'd be like, wow, you'd think that that mile marker was so important, you would remember that. But sometimes there's little pieces of the mile markers that we don't remember because we didn't cling to them for the important factor, right? Um, Another mile mark. Oh, first child. I mean, I can remember details of when my wife went into labor, and you know, we had been told by the doctors, if the contractions are more than 8 minutes apart, you don't need to go to the hospital. And I remember when my wife realized she was having contractions, she's like, time them. And so I started, you know, timing them, and it was like, you know, 53 minutes. Like, I don't think we need to go anywhere. And you know, so we went to bed, and I remember, I think it was probably 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. I woke up and she was standing over me. It's time to go. And I shot into action really slow. I had been sleeping. And so I remember getting her in the car and getting everything in the car. And we had to drive about 15 miles to the hospital because we lived in a different community, and we had to drive to Ames. And so we had to drive all the way over there. And I mean, I was driving like a madman. And I remember zipping up to the hospital and getting her out of the car, and getting her into so the nurses could get her started, getting her up to the uh, maternity ward. I don't remember what they called it. I think it was maternity ward. I think, I don't know. And then I had to go move the car, and then I had to run back in, and you know, I was just rushing, and then it seemed like hours passed because hours passed. And finally they said, you know, we're gonna have to take the baby C-section. And that was the trouble because I knew I had parked in the B section, and I didn't know if I had to go move my car now to a different section. I didn't know, you know. But I do remember that because Jake was delivered with a C-section, they had to finish the surgery and taking care of everything with my wife. And they took me and they took our son and they set us in a side room, and I got to hold that miracle for the very first time. And I remember looking into those eyes of that miracle. And he couldn't even see me. I mean, he probably could see a little bit. I don't know. He couldn't focus on me. I can tell you that much. Otherwise, he probably would have been screaming, "Put me back! Put me!" I don't know. But that milestone, that mile marker when he was born, man, such an important mile marker. We talk a little bit about our diagnosis. Mine was in 2003. Actually, it started about 20 some years before that. And the diagnosis process took forever because they didn't have the technology that they have now. And they didn't have, when I was first starting to have symptoms, they didn't have an MRI. They had barely just come out with a CAT scan. And we know that doesn't do much good. So for diagnosing MS anyway. But I remember going through that diagnosis, that how long it took and the frustration and everything. When I finally got the diagnosis, that mile marker is there, very strongly embedded in my mind. And then we think about other mile markers, our child's graduation, and like this weekend, the child's wedding when Joe and Maria's son Caleb and his wife Erin, now when they exchanged vows and their wedding took place, and now it's to be there and experience and watching a mile marker getting set into stone for them, but we got the privilege of being part of it. And I got to thinking about all of these mile markers and what makes them stand out. And I think this is important for us here on Motivational Monday to realize when we look at the mile markers in our lives, most of the time, now I'm not going to say 100% of the time or always, but the majority of the time, those mile markers have to do with connections in our lives, with people in our lives, that they make those moments even more important. They make those moments even more spectacular. And I want us to think about that. That's when we have those times where it's the people in our lives that really are kind of putting those moments for those mile markers to be set in stone, to be set in the concrete and really held tightly. It's when we are connected with people. The reason I want us to make sure that we take some time to think about that, it's in those connecting points that we can't get lazy, and we can't get so absorbed with the negative and the bad things that are happening in our world that we forsake the relationships and the connections that we have with the important people around us. It's in those times when we need to hug close and pull close to the people that are important, that are going to help us formulate those huge mile markers in our life journey. And let's celebrate the friendships. Let's celebrate the relationships. Let's celebrate the connections that we have, because it's in those moments of being connected and interconnected that we're setting mile markers in our life, and they're going to be setting mile markers in their lives. But we look back and our lives are so much better when we have those moments with the important people and we're celebrating our time together. This weekend I had a great time. It was a kind of an eye-opening time, because I realized it had been quite a long time before my friend Joe and I got together. And if it wasn't for the fact that his son was getting married this weekend, we may not have gotten together right away again for a long time. But we realized, because it had been so long that we can't let that happen again. You know, we had a great time. We laughed. I laughed harder this weekend. My buddy Joe, he's one of the funniest people I know, and I will tell you, he's not a comedian. I think he could be, but he says he's not willing to do the work because he's lazy. Let's just be honest. I hope he watches this and hears me say he's lazy. He doesn't want to be a hardworking comedian. He wants to be some lazy engineer coming up with things to make RVs better. I don't know. Silly man. Anyway, it was through this weekend, though, that I really got to thinking about the mile markers in our lives. What makes them so important? What makes them so spectacular? It's the connections with people. And we have to make sure that we are doing our jobs to take care of those connections with other people, to foster those relationships and to keep them healthy, keep them growing, because it's in that our lives become rich and our lives become better because of the people that we are with and the people that are investing in our lives and we're investing in theirs, and we grow together. So my challenge for you here on Motivational Monday, pay attention to the mile markers on life's journey. Look back and see the spectacular mile markers on your life journey, and celebrate the lives of the people that have been part of those mile markers in your life. Make sure you're reaching out to them, thanking them for being a part of making your life so spectacular. And then be careful as you go forward to pay attention to the people who are setting new mile markers in place on your life journey, and celebrate them in those moments, and then go back and celebrate them again later. Because when we celebrate those connections, we enjoy the mile markers through our entire life journey, over and over and over again. Hey, I want to thank you for taking time to hang out with me here. I hope that you heard something today that was motivational, inspirational for you. And hopefully you'll think a little bit about the mile markers on your life's journey, and you'll celebrate the relationships and the friendships that you gathered along the way. And you're going to have a great week this week as you reminisce and as you reconnect with those important people that help you put those mile markers in place. So I think that pretty much wraps up my challenge and my thoughts for us today. Hopefully you found something good from this. And if you did, please like the video, share it on YouTube, and share it on Facebook and whatnot. But do me a favor and like the video, share it with people, subscribe. If you're going to subscribe, there's a little bell right next to the subscribe button. Go ahead and click that bell so that it'll help you stay informed of any new videos that we post, so you get all of the stuff that's coming up ahead of us. And want to make sure that you are able to keep connected with all of the stuff that we got coming. And without anything else for me to do or do or whatever they call it, I guess, I'm going to tell you the same thing I say all the time. Live today in such a way that makes yesterday jealous because it didn't get to have that much fun. And it makes tomorrow giddy with excitement because it knows you're coming. Live your life with fullness, and make sure to celebrate life's mile markers and the people that helped you put them there. Thanks so much. I'm Dennis Tooley with the MS Warriors Way podcast and Multiple Sclerosis TV. Look forward to seeing you again soon right here on Multiple Sclerosis TV.